My husband made me a cup of coffee which had a very strange smell. I swapped mugs with my sister-in-laws, and what happened next changed everything. I'm talking about the kind of change that splits your life in two before and after, the kind that makes you realize you've been sleeping next to a monster for 43 years. Let me paint you the picture. Sunday brunch at our house in Oakland. The dining room was filled with that golden morning light coming through the lace curtains my mama gave me when Vernon and I first got married. Gospel music playing soft in the background. Kirk Franklin, because my sister-in-law Charlene always said she liked contemporary gospel better than the hymns. The table was set nice with my good china, the kind you only bring out for special occasions. Scrambled eggs with cheese, turkey sausage, buttered grits, and fresh biscuits cooling on the counter. Everything looked perfect. Everything felt wrong. Vernon placed the coffee mug in front of me with that smile I'd loved for 4 decades. "Made this special for you, baby," he said. "Just how you like it. 2 sugars, splash of cream." But when I lifted that mug to my lips, I smelled it. Metallic. Sharp. Wrong. And I saw something else. The way Charlene's eyes locked on me from across the table. The way Vernon stood there, not sitting down, just watching. Waiting. 6 months of hell had taught me to trust my instincts. 6 months of mysterious illnesses, hospital visits, doctors who couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. 6 months of my body betraying me while my career crumbled and my competitors circled like vultures. So I did something crazy. I did something that probably saved my life. "Oh, Charlene," I said, keeping my voice sweet as pie. "Would you mind switching seats with me? The sun's hitting my eyes something terrible from this angle." "Sure, Willa," she said, but I caught the flicker of confusion in her eyes. We both stood up. And in that moment, while everyone was moving and adjusting, I switched our mugs, mine for hers. I'd been wearing gloves, thin evening gloves I claimed were for my arthritis. But really, I'd been wearing them to avoid fingerprints, to avoid leaving any trace on that mug. Charlene sat down in my old seat, picked up what she thought was her mug, and took a long drink. Before we continue, shout out to Darnell from Detroit. We appreciate the love you show by commenting and sharing. Now let me tell you how I got here. Let me tell you about the life I built and how my own family tried to tear it down. My name is Wilhelmina Clark, but everyone calls me Willa. I'm 69 years old, and up until 6 months ago, I was one of the most successful marketing executives in the San Francisco Bay Area. 40 years in the game. Started as a secretary at a small firm in 1976, worked my way up through every position you can imagine, put myself through night school, earned my MBA while raising 2 kids, became the first Black woman to make senior partner at Henderson & Associates back in 1994. But I didn't stop there. In 2010, I started my own firm, Clark Strategic Marketing. Small operation, just me and 3 employees at first, working out of a converted office space in downtown Oakland. Now we've got 22 people on staff and clients from Seattle to San Diego. I specialized in helping Black-owned businesses scale up, creating campaigns that honored their roots while reaching new markets. My work mattered. My work changed lives. Vernon and I met at a church picnic in 1982. He was handsome, charming, worked in middle management at a shipping company. We got married 6 months later at Third Baptist Church with half of Oakland in attendance. It was a good marriage, or at least I thought it was. He supported my career, didn't complain when I worked late, seemed proud when I won awards and brought in big clients. His sister Charlene, though. That's where things got complicated. Charlene started her own marketing firm 5 years after I did. Called it Crawford Marketing Solutions, using her maiden name because she said it sounded more professional. At first I was happy for her, encouraged her even, gave her advice, introduced her to some of my contacts. That's what family does, right? We lift each other up. But Charlene wanted more than success. She wanted my success. She wanted my clients, my reputation, my spot at the table I'd spent 40 years earning. 3 years ago, she started underbidding me for contracts. Nothing obvious at first, just a few small accounts here and there, then bigger ones. Then she went after the Westfield Group, a collective of Black-owned retail stores that had been my client for 8 years. She offered them rates so low she had to be losing money, just to steal them away from me. When that didn't work, she started spreading rumors, saying I was getting too old for the business, that my ideas weren't fresh anymore, that younger clients needed younger leadership. I didn't let it shake me. I'd dealt with worse than petty competition. I had the Premier Hospitality Group contract coming up, a chance to rebrand 15 Black-owned hotels and restaurants across California. It was the biggest account of my career. $2.5 million over 3 years. The kind of contract that would set up my retirement beautifully and establish my firm as a major player for the next generation. That's when I got sick. It started in April, just after I'd submitted my preliminary proposal to Premier Hospitality. I woke up one morning feeling dizzy, nauseous. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't hold my coffee mug. Vernon drove me to the emergency room. They ran tests, kept me overnight, sent me home with a diagnosis of vertigo and a prescription for motion sickness medication. 2 weeks later, it happened again. Worse this time. Vomiting, chest pains, irregular heartbeat. Another ER visit. More tests. The doctors were stumped. Maybe it was stress, they said. Maybe I was working too hard. Maybe I should consider slowing down. I tried to push through, had an important presentation for Premier Hospitality in May. But the morning of the presentation, I collapsed in my office. My assistant Tamika found me on the floor, barely conscious. Ambulance. Hospital. 3 days of testing. They found elevated liver enzymes, kidney dysfunction, signs of toxic exposure. But to what? They couldn't say. I missed the presentation. My partner Reggie had to handle it alone, and while he did his best, it wasn't enough. Premier Hospitality was concerned. They wanted to meet with me personally, but I was in the hospital. They decided to wait, to consider other firms while I recovered. That's when Charlene made her move. She contacted Premier Hospitality, expressed concern about my health, suggested they couldn't afford to wait for someone who might not recover. She presented her own proposal. It was good. It was very good. Too good. She'd somehow gotten information about my pricing structure, my creative approach, my strategy. It was like she'd seen my proposal. Later, I'd figure out how. Vernon had access to my home office. He'd been taking pictures of my files when I was sleeping or in the shower, sending them to his sister. They'd been planning this for months. But I'm getting ahead of myself. June was worse. I'd have good days and bad days. The good days, I'd go into the office, try to work, try to save the Premier Hospitality account. The bad days, I couldn't get out of bed. Muscle weakness, tremors, confusion. My team was worried. My clients were worried. Vernon was the perfect concerned husband, taking me to appointments, bringing me meals in bed, managing my medications. My medications. Lord, the medications. The doctors kept adding more. Something for the nausea, something for the tremors. Something for my heart, something to protect my liver. Vernon organized them in a weekly pill box, made sure I took them on schedule. "Got to stay on top of this, baby," he'd say. "Can't have you forgetting." In July, Charlene started coming around more. "Just want to check on my sister-in-law," she'd say. She'd bring food, casseroles, soups, desserts. "You need to keep your strength up, Willa." She and Vernon would sit in the kitchen, talking in low voices. When I'd shuffle in, weak and disoriented, they'd change the subject, smile, ask how I was feeling. I lost 15 pounds. My skin took on a grayish tone. My hair started thinning. I looked like death, and I felt worse. But the doctors still couldn't figure it out. One suggested it might be psychological, psychosomatic. "Maybe you should see a therapist," he said. "Sometimes our minds can manifest physical symptoms." That made me angry. Angry enough that something clicked in my foggy brain. I'd been sick for months, and every doctor, every test, every treatment had failed. What if this wasn't natural? What if someone was doing this to me? It sounds paranoid. I know it does. But when you're lying in a hospital bed for the fourth time in 4 months, when you've lost a major contract because you literally cannot stand up without falling over, when your own body feels like it's trying to kill you, you start thinking dangerous thoughts. I started paying attention, really paying attention. I noticed that I always felt worse after Vernon made me my morning coffee, after Charlene's visits, after meals that Vernon prepared. I noticed the way they looked at each other when I struggled to walk across the room. I noticed Vernon checking his phone and smiling, then looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. In August, I bought a small recording device, one of those tiny things that looks like a pen. I started keeping it in my robe pocket, turning it on whenever Vernon and Charlene were together in the house. I also started secretly dumping out my medications and replacing them with vitamins that looked similar. I stopped drinking the coffee Vernon made unless I'd watched him make it from start to finish. I started feeling a little better. Not much, but enough to think clearly. And I started documenting everything. Every symptom, every time I felt sick, what I'd eaten, who'd been around. I kept a journal hidden in my closet behind my winter coats. I forwarded suspicious text messages I found on Vernon's phone when he was in the shower, messages to and from Charlene, vague but pointed. How's she doing today? Any change? The presentation is next week. Then, 2 weeks ago, Premier Hospitality reached out. They wanted to make a final decision. They wanted to meet with both me and Charlene, hear final pitches from both firms. Winner takes all. That same day, Vernon suggested a family brunch. "Let's gather, everyone," he said. "You've been sick for so long, baby. I think some family time might lift your spirits. Just us, Charlene, maybe a few others. Keep it small and intimate." I agreed. Because by then, I knew. I didn't have proof yet, but I knew in my bones what they'd been doing. And I knew they'd make their final move soon. Premier Hospitality's decision would come down within days. If I landed that account, all their months of poisoning me would be for nothing. So I prepared. I wore a wire, a real one, borrowed from a private investigator I'd hired. I positioned my phone on the bookshelf, recording video. I wore those gloves. And I waited. When Vernon brought me that coffee with its strange metallic smell, I knew this was it. This was their end game, and that's why I switched the mugs. Charlene took a drink, then another. She set the mug down, smiled at me. "This is nice," she said. "All of us together." 5 minutes passed. Vernon kept glancing at me, waiting for something. Then Charlene's hand started shaking. Just a little tremor at first. She looked down at it, confused. "That's strange," she said. The tremor got worse, spread up her arm. Her face went pale. She tried to stand, stumbled, caught herself on the table. The good china rattled. "Charlene?" Vernon jumped up, rushing to her side. "What's wrong?" "I don't—" Her words slurred. "I feel—" And then she looked at me. Really looked at me. And I saw it in her eyes. She knew. She understood what had happened. "The coffee," she gasped. "You switched—" Her whole body convulsed. She collapsed, Vernon catching her before she hit the floor. He was screaming now, calling 911, and I just sat there, calm as could be, with my phone recording every second. As the ambulance sirens grew louder in the distance, Charlene's eyes locked on mine one more time, and I smiled. A small smile. The kind that said, "I know what you did." The paramedics burst through my front door 6 minutes after Vernon's 911 call. 6 minutes that felt like an eternity. 6 minutes where everything I'd suspected, everything I'd feared, everything I'd quietly been gathering evidence about, all of it came spilling out like poison from an open wound. Charlene was on the floor, her body jerking with violent tremors, foam at the corners of her mouth. Vernon was cradling her head, crying, screaming at the 911 operator. "I don't know what happened. She just collapsed. My wife made coffee, and—" He stopped. The words hung in the air between us. My wife made coffee. His eyes met mine across the room, and I watched the realization spread across his face like ice water. I hadn't drunk the coffee. I was sitting at the table, perfectly calm, perfectly healthy, while his sister convulsed on my dining room floor. "Willa?" His voice cracked. "What did you do?" I didn't answer. I just sat there with my phone propped on the bookshelf, recording everything. With the wire taped to my chest under my Sunday dress, catching every word. The paramedics pushed past Vernon, dropping to their knees beside Charlene. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Ma'am, what did you ingest?" Charlene's eyes rolled back. Her lips moved, trying to form words. One of the paramedics, a young black woman with her hair pulled back in a neat bun, checked Charlene's pulse, shined a light in her eyes. Pupils dilated, respiratory distress, pulse rapid and irregular, possible toxic ingestion. "Toxic ingestion?" Vernon's voice went high and panicked. "What are you talking about? She just had coffee." The paramedic's partner, an older white man with gray at his temples, was already setting up an IV line. "We need to know exactly what she consumed. Every detail matters." That's when Charlene started talking. Delirious, in pain, her body betraying her the way mine had betrayed me for 6 months. But the words came out clear enough for the recording. "The coffee," she gasped. "Wrong coffee. She switched, Vernon, she switched the mugs." Vernon's face went white. "Charlene, stop talking. Just stop." But she couldn't stop. The poison was working through her system, and whatever they'd put in that coffee, whatever they'd been giving me in smaller doses for months, it was loosening her tongue along with everything else. "We put it in her coffee every Sunday," Charlene moaned. "For months, small amounts, pharmaceutical compounds, to make her sick, to make her lose premier hospitality. I needed that account, Vernon. I needed it." The room went silent, except for the beeping of medical equipment and Charlene's labored breathing. The paramedics exchanged glances. The young woman reached for her radio. Vernon lunged forward, grabbing Charlene's hand. "Stop! Just stop talking! You don't know what you're saying!" But Charlene was beyond stopping. The pain had cracked her open, and everything was spilling out. "The antifreeze," she whispered. "The arsenic. The prescription pills we crushed up. All of it. Every week. A little more each time. Today was supposed to be the final dose. Enough to—" She convulsed again, and the paramedics moved Vernon aside. "Sir, step back. We need to work." Vernon stumbled backward, and that's when he really looked at me, saw me sitting there in my gloves, calm and collected, saw my phone positioned just right on the bookshelf, saw the small bulge under my dress where the wire was taped. "You knew," he breathed. "You knew, and you—" "I suspected," I said quietly. "For weeks now. Ever since I started feeling better when I stopped drinking your special coffee. When I started dumping out the medications you so carefully organized for me. When I stopped eating the food Charlene brought over." The young paramedic stood up, her radio to her mouth. "Dispatch, we need police response at this location. Possible poisoning case. Suspects may be present on scene." Vernon's face crumbled. 43 years of marriage, and I watched it all dissolve in that moment. "Willa, baby, please. You don't understand. Charlene, it was her idea. She convinced me. She said you'd be fine, that we were just making you sick enough to lose the account, not to—" "Not to kill me?" I finished for him. My voice was steady, but inside I was shaking. "Vernon, there's enough poison in that coffee to stop my heart. The hospital reports will prove it. I've been documenting every symptom for months. Every time I felt sick, every hospital visit, every test result. I hired a private investigator. I have copies of the text messages between you and Charlene. I have recordings of your conversations. I have everything." The second ambulance arrived. Backup, because Charlene was in bad shape. More paramedics flooded my dining room. They got her on a stretcher, started pumping her full of activated charcoal, talking fast about poison control and emergency protocols. As they wheeled her out, Charlene's eyes found mine one last time. "You won't get premier hospitality," she managed to say through the oxygen mask. "Even if you destroy me. They'll never trust you now. You're finished." I stood up slowly, my knees steady for the first time in months. "Charlene," I said, "I already got premier hospitality. They called me Friday, signed the contract Saturday. Didn't Vernon tell you?" The look on her face would have been funny if it wasn't so tragic. Vernon made a sound like a wounded animal. "That's right," I continued. "While you were planning to kill me today, I was closing the biggest deal of my career. And now you're going to prison for attempted murder." The police arrived as the ambulances pulled away. 2 officers, a black man about 50 with kind eyes, and a Latina woman younger than my daughter. They took one look at the scene, me standing calm in my Sunday dress and gloves, Vernon pacing and crying, the coffee mugs still on the table, and started asking questions. I gave them everything, showed them my phone recording, told them about the wire I was wearing, explained how I'd been documenting my mysterious illness for months, how I'd hired a private investigator named Leon Watts, who'd been gathering evidence, how I'd suspected Vernon and Charlene were poisoning me to sabotage my career. "She switched the mugs," Vernon kept saying, like that somehow made him the victim. "She knew the coffee was poisoned and she gave it to Charlene. That's attempted murder too. She tried to kill my sister." The male officer, his badge said Rodriguez, which seemed wrong, but then I saw his wedding ring and understood, looked at Vernon with an expression I recognized. The look you give someone who's dug their own grave and doesn't even know they're standing in it. "Sir," Officer Rodriguez said calmly, "are you admitting that you knowingly served poisoned coffee to your wife?" Vernon's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No. "That's not—" "Because what I'm hearing," the female officer, Martinez, added, "is that you and your sister conspired to poison Mrs. Clark over a period of months with the intent to harm her professionally and possibly physically. Is that correct?" I handed them my journal. 6 months of documentation. Dates, times, symptoms, hospital records I'd requested copies of, the business card of my private investigator. "Leon Watts has been following up on my suspicions for the past month," I explained. "He's documented 17 separate occasions where either Vernon or Charlene purchased unusual items, antifreeze from hardware stores, prescription medications from different pharmacies using fake names, industrial cleaning supplies. He has receipts, security footage, everything." Vernon sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he whispered. "Charlene said it would just make you sick for a while, miss a few meetings, lose the account, then we'd stop and you'd get better and everything would go back to normal." "Except I'd have lost my biggest client," I said. "My reputation would be ruined, my firm would struggle, and Charlene would swoop in and take everything I'd built." "She's my sister," Vernon said, like that explained anything. "She needed this opportunity. You already have so much, Willa. Your successful firm, your reputation, all those awards. Charlene just wanted a chance to shine." The officers were writing all of this down. Vernon didn't even realize he was confessing. "Mr. Clark," Officer Martinez said, "I'm going to need you to stop talking until we can get you to the station. You have the right to remain silent," she continued with the Miranda warning while Vernon sat there, broken. Officer Rodriguez called for backup and contacted the hospital where they'd taken Charlene. "We need a guard on the patient in the ambulance headed your way," he said into his radio. "Suspected poisoning victim is also a suspect in an attempted murder case." My phone rang. It was Tamika, my assistant. "Miss Willa, I just got a call from the hospital. They said Charlene Clark was admitted with possible poisoning. Are you okay? What's happening?" "I'm fine, baby," I said. "Better than I've been in months. Listen, I need you to call Reggie and tell him to secure all our files related to Premier Hospitality. Then call our lawyer, Denise Thompson. Tell her I need her at Oakland Police Department as soon as possible. And Tamika? Call my daughter. Tell Shanice her father's been arrested." There was a long pause. "Arrested? Miss Willa, what?" "I'll explain everything later. Just make those calls. And Tamika, thank you. For believing me when I said something was wrong. For helping me keep the business running when I could barely stand. You saved my life in more ways than one." I hung up and turned to Officer Rodriguez. "I'd like to request that the coffee mugs on the table be secured as evidence. I'd also like to request toxicology tests on my own blood work from previous hospital visits. I believe you'll find traces of the same compounds that are currently in Charlene Clark's system." "We'll handle that, Mrs. Clark," he assured me. "You did everything right. The documentation, the recording, protecting yourself. You may have just built the prosecution's entire case for them." Vernon was led out in handcuffs. As they walked him past me, he stopped, looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "I loved you," he said. "I do love you. This was just business. It wasn't personal." "You tried to kill me, Vernon," I said softly. "You put poison in my coffee every Sunday for 6 months. You watched me suffer and waste away and almost die. You held my hand in the hospital while you were the one making me sick. How is that not personal?" He didn't have an answer for that. After they took him away, I stood alone in my dining room. The Sunday brunch was still laid out on the table. Cold eggs, cooling grits, biscuits going stale. Gospel music still playing soft in the background. Everything looked the same as it had an hour ago. But everything was different. My phone buzzed, a text from Leon Watts, my investigator. "Heard the news. Well done. I have 3 more boxes of evidence ready for the DA. You're going to bury them." Another text, this one from my daughter Shanice. "Mom, what is happening? The police just called. Are you okay? I'm coming over right now." And then one more. From Gerald Westfield, CEO of Premier Hospitality Group. "Mrs. Clark, I just heard about the incident. If you need anything, time, resources, anything at all, please let us know. We stand by our decision to work with you. Your strength and professionalism through your illness has been remarkable. Now we know why. Looking forward to our partnership." I sat down at my dining table, looked at those 2 coffee mugs, one empty, one still full of poison, and I let myself feel it. All of it. The betrayal, the rage, the relief, the bone-deep satisfaction of being right, of surviving, of turning their weapon back on them. Then I picked up my phone and called my pastor, Reverend Williams at Third Baptist. "Reverend," I said when he answered, "I need to come by the church. I have a lot to be thankful for, and I need to pray." Because in that moment, with my husband in custody and my sister-in-law fighting for her life from the poison meant for me, with evidence of their conspiracy stacked up like Judgment Day, I felt something I hadn't felt in 6 months. I felt free. 3 days later, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Charlene had stabilized. She was going to live. And the moment she was strong enough to leave the hospital, she'd be arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and a dozen other charges that my lawyer Denise explained in detail. Vernon was already in county jail, denied bail. The judge called him a flight risk and a danger to the community. My community. The community I'd served for 40 years. The toxicology reports came back. They found everything Charlene had confessed to and more. Ethylene glycol, arsenic trioxide, crushed up prescription medications, beta blockers, antipsychotics, blood thinners. Doses that had been carefully calibrated to make me sick, but not kill me. Until that final Sunday, when they'd decided to end it. The DA called it one of the most premeditated attempted murder cases she'd seen in her career. She wanted to try them both to the fullest extent of the law. I said yes. I said prosecute them. I said make an example. Because they hadn't just tried to kill me. They'd tried to kill everything I'd built. My business, my reputation, my legacy, and they'd almost succeeded, but I survived, and now it was time for them to face justice. The preliminary hearing was set for 2 weeks out. Denise Thompson, my lawyer, a sharp sister from Sacramento who'd made her name prosecuting white-collar crime, assured me we had an airtight case. "Willa," she said, sitting in my living room with files spread across my coffee table. "I've been doing this for 25 years. I have never seen a case this well documented by the victim. You handed them everything on a silver platter: the recordings, the journal, the private investigator's evidence, the confession on tape, the physical evidence of the poisoned coffee. They can't wiggle out of this." I nodded, but something was bothering me. "What about Vernon's defense? He'll say it was all Charlene's idea, that he was manipulated." Denise smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Let him try. We have text messages going back 8 months where he's discussing the plan with Charlene. We have security footage of him purchasing antifreeze. We have testimony from your assistant that he always insisted on making your Sunday coffee personally, and we have his confession to the police officers, on record, before they even Mirandized him." She leaned forward. "Willa, they're going to prison. The only question is for how long." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Vernon, about the man I'd married in 1982, the man who'd held our babies, who'd danced with me at our daughter's wedding, who'd sat beside me in church every Sunday for 43 years. How had that man become someone who could watch me suffer and do nothing? How had love turned into something so poisonous? Around midnight, my daughter Shanice came by. She had a key, let herself in, found me sitting in the dark in my living room. "Mama," she said, sitting beside me, taking my hand, "you need to rest." "I married a monster," I whispered. "How did I not see it?" "He wasn't always a monster," Shanice said gently. "People change, or maybe they just hide who they really are until something brings it out." She squeezed my hand. "But you survived, Mama. You were smart enough and strong enough to figure it out and stop them. That's what matters now." We sat in silence for a while. Then Shanice said, "The church is planning a prayer vigil for you. Wednesday night. Reverend Williams said half the congregation has been asking about you." I started crying then. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming knowledge that I wasn't alone. That while my husband had betrayed me, my community, my church family, my work family, my real family, they had my back. The preliminary hearing came. Charlene showed up in a wheelchair, still weak from the poisoning. She looked 20 years older than she had 2 weeks ago. Vernon wouldn't look at me. The judge reviewed the evidence, listened to the recordings, read the journal entries, examined the toxicology reports. When Charlene's lawyer tried to argue that his client had been delirious and her confession wasn't reliable, the DA played the recording of Vernon's confession too. "Your Honor," the DA said, "we have 2 separate confessions. Extensive physical evidence, months of documentation, and video recording of the crime in progress. The defendants poisoned Mrs. Clark systematically over 6 months with intent to harm her professional reputation and ultimately to kill her. This was premeditated, calculated, and nearly successful." The judge, a black woman about my age named Justice Lorraine Henderson, looked at Vernon and Charlene with an expression of pure disgust. "I'm binding both defendants over for trial," she said. "Bail is denied. These defendants pose a clear danger to Mrs. Clark and potentially others." She looked directly at me. "Mrs. Clark, I want to commend you for your courage and for the meticulous documentation that has made this prosecution possible. What was done to you was unconscionable." As they led Vernon and Charlene out of the courtroom, Charlene turned and hissed at me, "This isn't over. We'll beat this in trial. You'll see." But I just smiled, because I knew something she didn't. The trial was going to be a media sensation, and every black-owned business in California was watching to see what happened to the woman who'd built an empire from nothing and the family members who'd tried to tear her down. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in February, 6 months after that poisoned coffee. 6 months of healing, rebuilding, and watching my case become national news. Bay Area marketing executive poisoned by husband and sister-in-law in corporate sabotage plot. That was the headline in the San Francisco Chronicle. CNN picked it up. Forbes wrote a feature about corporate betrayal and family business rivalry. Black Enterprise put me on the cover with the title, Wilhelmina Clark, the woman who refused to die. But all of that was just noise. What mattered was the courtroom. What mattered was justice. The prosecutor was District Attorney Carmen Rodriguez, the same Officer Rodriguez's wife, which I learned later was a beautiful coincidence. She was fierce, thorough, and she had built a case so airtight that Vernon and Charlene's lawyers spent the first week just trying to suppress evidence. They failed. The courtroom was packed every single day. Members of my church filled the gallery wearing purple ribbons, the color of domestic violence awareness. My business partner Reggie sat behind me. My daughter Shanice held my hand. And every single day, more people showed up, Black businesswomen from across California. Entrepreneurs who'd heard my story, survivors of domestic violence who saw themselves in my struggle. Day 1 of testimony, DA Rodriguez called me to the stand. I wore a navy blue suit, professional, dignified. I'd gained back the 15 pounds I'd lost. My hair was done. I looked like myself again. Strong. Unbroken. Mrs. Clark, DA Rodriguez began. Please tell the court about the morning of October 13th. I took a breath and told them everything. The metallic smell of the coffee, the way Vernon watched me, the way Charlene's eyes tracked my every movement, how I'd switched the mugs, how Charlene had collapsed, how she'd confessed while the paramedics worked on her. Charlene's lawyer, a slick white man in an expensive suit, tried to shake me on cross-examination. Mrs. Clark, isn't it true that you deliberately gave poisoned coffee to my client? Yes, I said clearly. I gave her the coffee that was meant for me. The coffee her brother, my husband, had poisoned specifically to kill me. So you admit to attempted murder? I admit to self-defense, I corrected. I switched mugs to protect myself and to expose what they'd been doing to me for 6 months. If I'd drunk that coffee, I'd be dead, and they'd have gotten away with it. DA Rodriguez objected, but the point was made. The jury, 8 women and 4 men, half of them black or brown, looked at me with understanding. The medical testimony came next. 3 different toxicologists explained what had been found in Charlene's system and in my old blood samples from hospital visits going back 6 months. The levels were damning. Small amounts at first, building up over time. The final dose would have been fatal to someone my size. In your professional opinion, DA Rodriguez asked the lead toxicologist, a Dr. Patricia Okafor from UC San Francisco, would Mrs. Clark have survived if she'd consumed the coffee that was given to Mrs. Charlene Crawford? Dr. Okafor looked at the jury. No. Based on Mrs. Clark's medical history and the concentration of toxins in that coffee, she would have experienced cardiac arrest within 30 to 40 minutes. At her age, and with the cumulative damage from months of poisoning, survival would have been unlikely even with immediate medical intervention. The courtroom went silent. Shanice gripped my hand so tight it hurt. Vernon's lawyer tried a different approach. His client wasn't the mastermind, he argued. Vernon was a weak man. Manipulated by his domineering sister, he'd gone along with the plan but never truly intended to kill anyone. Then DA Rodriguez played the text messages, months of them, projected on screens for the whole courtroom to see. Vernon to Charlene, June 15th. She's getting suspicious. We need to increase the doses. Charlene to Vernon, July 3rd. The premier hospitality presentation is in 2 weeks. If she's still functional, we've failed. Step it up. Vernon to Charlene, August 20th. I bought the stronger stuff. This should do it. Charlene to Vernon, October 10th. Sunday brunch. Final dose. Make it look natural. Heart attack from stress. Vernon to Charlene, October 12th. I love you, sis. We're doing this for us. For our future. The jury's faces said it all. This wasn't manipulation. This was conspiracy. This was two people plotting murder together. My private investigator, Leon Watts, testified next. He presented security footage of Vernon buying antifreeze from 3 different hardware stores. Photos of Charlene meeting with a pharmacy technician who'd later been arrested for selling prescription medications illegally. Bank records showing unusual cash withdrawals from both Vernon and Charlene's accounts, payments to that same pharmacy tech. Mr. Watts, D.A. Rodriguez asked, in your 20 years as a private investigator, have you ever seen a more premeditated attempted murder case? Leon looked directly at Vernon and Charlene. Never. This was systematic, calculated, and cruel. They watched her suffer for months and kept going. The defense tried to discredit him. Failed. The evidence was overwhelming. Then came the character witnesses. My assistant Tamika testified about how I'd struggled to work, how Vernon would call and insist she send me home because I looked too sick to be in the office. She cried on the stand, talking about how she'd watched me waste away and felt helpless. Reverend Williams from Third Baptist testified about Vernon's behavior at church. He would stand up during prayer time and ask for healing for his wife, the Reverend said, his voice heavy with disgust. He would hold her hand and cry. And all along, he was the one poisoning her. That's not just attempted murder. That's blasphemy. Gerald Westfield from Premier Hospitality Group testified about Charlene's aggressive pursuit of the contract. She contacted us multiple times after Mrs. Clark became ill, he said. She implied that Mrs. Clark was too sick to handle our account, that we should switch to her firm. She seemed almost excited about Mrs. Clark's condition. It was unsettling. The trial lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of evidence, testimony, and watching Vernon and Charlene's defense crumble. Their lawyers tried everything. They tried to paint me as paranoid. They tried to suggest I'd poisoned myself for attention. They tried to claim the confession was coerced. None of it worked. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. 4 hours after 3 weeks of trial. That's how clear-cut it was. When they came back, the forewoman, a black woman about my daughter's age, read the verdict with a steady voice. In the case of the People versus Vernon Clark, on the count of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty. On all counts of poisoning and assault with intent to cause great bodily harm, we find the defendant guilty. Vernon's head dropped. He didn't make a sound. In the case of the People versus Charlene Crawford, on the count of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty. On all counts of poisoning and assault with intent to cause great bodily harm, we find the defendant guilty. Charlene started crying. Loud, ugly sobs. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder, but she shook it off. The courtroom erupted. People were crying, hugging, praising God. The judge had to bang her gavel 3 times to restore order. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Henderson looked at Vernon and Charlene like they were something she'd scraped off her shoe. In my 30 years on the bench, she said, I have never seen such calculated cruelty. You, Mr. Clark, betrayed the woman who loved you, who built a life with you, who trusted you completely. You watched her suffer, and you increased the poison. You planned her death while holding her hand in the hospital. Vernon was crying now, too. Your Honor, please. I'm sorry. I never meant... You meant to kill her. Judge Henderson cut him off. The evidence is clear. The jury has spoken. And now you will face the consequences. She sentenced Vernon to 25 years to life. No possibility of parole for 20 years. He would be 92 years old before he could even hope for release. Then she turned to Charlene. Mrs. Crawford, you weaponized family bonds to commit attempted murder. You used corporate rivalry as justification for taking a woman's life. You showed no remorse, no mercy, no humanity. The sentence for you is the same: 25 years to life." Charlene screamed, actually screamed in the courtroom. "This is wrong. She switched the mugs. She tried to kill me." "You drank your own poison, Mrs. Crawford," Judge Henderson said coldly, "and now you'll spend the rest of your life paying for it. Bailiff, remove the defendants." As they were led away, Vernon looked back at me one last time. "Willa," he called out, "please, forgive me." I stood up, looked him in the eye, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I forgive you, Vernon, but I'll never forget, and neither will anyone else." The courtroom erupted again. This time the judge let it happen. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed me, cameras everywhere, microphones in my face, questions shouted from every direction. DA Rodriguez stepped up beside me. "Mrs. Clark has a statement," she said. I looked into those cameras and spoke from my heart. 6 months ago, the two people I trusted most in the world tried to kill me. They tried to take my life, my business, my legacy. They almost succeeded. But I survived. And I survived because I trusted my instincts, documented everything, and refused to be a victim. I took a breath. The crowd was silent. To every woman out there who suspects something is wrong in her marriage, in her family, in her business, trust yourself. Document everything. Get help. Don't ignore the warning signs. I'm alive today because I paid attention. More questions, more cameras, but I was done. I had said what I needed to say. 3 months later, I stood in the boardroom of Premier Hospitality Group's headquarters in Los Angeles. 15 executives sat around the table, all of them leaders of Black-owned hotels and restaurants that were part of the collective. Gerald Westfield introduced me. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present the rebranding campaign created by Clark Strategic Marketing. Mrs. Wilhelmina Clark has personally overseen every aspect of this project, and I believe you'll find it represents the future of Black hospitality in America." I stood up. At 69 years old, healthier and stronger than I'd been in years, I presented the campaign that would define the next phase of my career. The campaign was called Legacy Tables, a celebration of Black culinary traditions, family recipes, and the stories behind every dish served in their restaurants. It honored the past while building toward the future. It was everything Charlene had wanted to create, but better, deeper, more authentic. Because I'd lived it, I'd survived it, and I knew the value of legacy. When I finished the presentation, the room stood and applauded. 3 of the executives had tears in their eyes. Gerald shook my hand. "Mrs. Clark, this is extraordinary. You've given us more than a marketing campaign. You've given us our story." The Premier Hospitality contract led to 6 more major accounts. By the end of the year, Clark Strategic Marketing had grown from 22 employees to 38. We opened a second office in Los Angeles. Forbes named me one of the most influential women in marketing over 60. But the real victory came on a Sunday morning, almost exactly 1 year after the poisoning. I was at Third Baptist Church, sitting in my usual pew. Shanice beside me, my grandchildren bouncing in their seats. Reverend Williams was preaching about restoration, about how God can take the worst betrayal and turn it into triumph. He looked right at me. "Sister Willa Clark knows about restoration," he said. "She knows about betrayal. She knows about standing in the valley of death and refusing to lie down. And look at her now, thriving, successful, free." The congregation stood and applauded. I tried not to cry, but I couldn't help it. After service, people lined up to hug me, to tell me their stories of survival, to thank me for speaking up, for fighting back, for showing that 70 isn't the end. It can be a new beginning. That afternoon, I went home to my house in Oakland. The house Vernon and I had bought in 1985, the house where he'd tried to kill me. But it didn't feel like his house anymore. I'd redecorated. New furniture, new paint, new memories being made with my grandchildren running through the halls. I made myself a cup of coffee, real coffee, no poison, no fear. I sat in my kitchen with the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, and I thought about everything I'd survived: the betrayal, the sickness, the trial, the victory. And I realized something important. Vernon and Charlene had tried to take everything from me, but they'd actually given me something instead. They'd given me proof of my own strength. They'd shown me who my real family was. Not the people who shared my blood, but the people who showed up when I needed them. They'd taught me that survival isn't just about not dying. It's about choosing to live fully, fiercely, without apology. I picked up my phone and called Tamika. "Hey," I said. "I've been thinking. It's time we opened that third office. I'm thinking Atlanta. What do you say?" She laughed. "Miss Willa, you never stop, do you?" "Not anymore," I said. "Not ever again." Because that's what they didn't understand, Vernon and Charlene. They thought they could break me by making me weak, but I'd been strong all along. I just needed to remember it. My name is Wilhelmina Clark. I'm 70 years old. I'm a successful marketing executive. I'm a survivor. I'm a mother, a grandmother, a friend, a businesswoman, a fighter. And I'm not done yet, not by a long shot. Vernon and Charlene are in prison. They'll die there, most likely. Their names are synonymous with betrayal and attempted murder. Their businesses are gone, their reputations destroyed. And me? I'm thriving. I'm growing. I'm building the legacy they tried to poison. Every morning I wake up in my house. I make my own coffee. I look at my reflection and I see a woman who refused to die, who turned her worst nightmare into her greatest victory. That's the real revenge. Not the prison sentences, though those help. Not the guilty verdicts, though those bring peace. The real revenge is living well, living fully, taking everything they tried to steal and building it bigger, better, stronger. I won Premier Hospitality. I won 6 more major accounts. I won my freedom. I won my life back. And they lost everything. That's justice. That's restoration. That's what happens when you underestimate a 70-year-old black woman who's been fighting her whole life. You don't win. You never win. Because women like me, we're survivors. We're warriors. We're unstoppable. And we always, always get the last word. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.